Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. This is, of course, where every week we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro. This is what's coming up on the show today. Well, it's another big media house has made an announcement that it'll be cutting jobs due to the challenging economic climate which has been devastated by COVID-19. We also catch up with the Southern African Freelancers Association to talk to us about their efforts to assist journalists who've been struggling during this time. Last week we hosted the National Community Radio Forum to speak on matters concerning community media, and one of the questions asked was around funding. Well, we found out that ICASA had what they had to say about the comments made on the show. And in our Back in History feature, we take you back to the 18th of July, 1997. And of course, that was Madiba's birthday, wasn't it? He turned 78, and we take you back then to find out how he celebrated his birthday. He would have turned 102 yesterday. So that's the show. But remember, you can engage with us on social media using the Twitter handle, #SABC Media Monitor. You can also share your views with us on WhatsApp, and our number is 065 862 4548. 065 862 4548. We'd love to hear from you. So before we get into those highlighted stories on the program, let's first take a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers this morning. And we start with the Sunday Times. And the Sunday Times is leading with the ongoing debate about whether our children should be back at school. Teacher unions are saying that a new timetable is required, insisting that Minister Angie Motshekga halt all classes until next month, saying the COVID-19 pandemic is too big a risk. The same story is what leads in the city press as the teacher unions want schools only to open after COVID-19 pandemic has reached its peak. But according to the paper, government is concerned about setting a precedent for other public servants who are in the frontline fight against the coronavirus. The Sunday Independent is reporting the President's spokesperson, Kusela Diko's husband, is among the beneficiaries of the multi-billion rand COVID-19 contracts, supplying personal protective equipment. The paper says that her husband, King Tandisizwe Diko's company, was awarded contracts worth 125 million rand by the Gauteng Health Department on March the 30th, just days after the President announced a national lockdown. The Sunday Tribune is leading with a story of how 8 million rand was blown on virtual concerts. Apparently, the eThekwini municipality spent the millions on entertainment and leisure during the national lockdown. This as ratepayers begin to feel the economic pinch as utility bills increase this month. It's believed that the show was meant to encourage communities to stay at home and educate them about health practices. And the Sunday World has a front page story. Radio personality DJ Fresh is taking his controversial poet Nsiki Mazwai to court over malicious claims that she posted on social media regarding a rapist row. All right, so let's now go on to social media and find out what the trending topics are in South Africa. And this is what's been fascinating you. Let's take a look at this list. And happy birthday, Lasizwe, Aaron Smith, Rick Ross, rugby player. But the story that grabbed my attention is number 4. And this was a short while ago. Gideon Gono, the former Reserve Bank governor of Zimbabwe. And he was trying to defend a story that was released by journalist Alex Magaiso, who said that whilst he was Reserve Bank governor, he was involved in a mechanization project where it seems senior government officials were given loans under the auspices of some kind of agricultural support scheme, but they never had to pay the money back. And so people have been responding on social media, complaining about what they see as rampant corruption at the time. The Reserve Bank governor tried to defend himself in a Sunday newspaper, but people are just not buying into that story whatsoever, saying that this is ZANU-PF looting at its best. All right, so that's what's been happening on social media and trending. Now, this year has been quite a year for the media sector, with big media houses such as the SABC, News 24, Associated Media Publishing, and just recently Prime Media talking about cutting jobs and leaving thousands jobless. The Prime Media Group announced on Thursday that it would be embarking on a retrenchment process due to the tough economic climate, which of course has been compounded by the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization's retrenchment process is in terms of Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. And to talk a little bit more about this and the challenges particularly faced by freelancers in South Africa, we're now joined by the chairperson of the Southern African Freelancers Association and freelance journalist, and that's Lynn Smith, and also journalist Hebron Maponya. A very good morning to you, Lynn. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you, Peter, and hello to everybody that's watching.
Great. So journalism generally has been going through tough times for quite a while now. But I want to take us back to when the freelancers organization, the Southern African Freelancers Organization, was formed. And that was a couple of decades ago. There must have been a need already then to form an organization such as yours.
I think so, yes. It's been 21 years now since SAFRIA was founded, and freelancers have always been people who are independent and like to do things perhaps a different way to the way that a corporate would. But we've always been under threat because we don't always have contracts, we don't always have the kind of protections that you would if you were working full-time for a company.
And this now has just gotten worse over time, but particularly during COVID-19. So what have you been trying to do as an association, perhaps to assist some of these freelancers, particularly the journalists?
Yeah, so we realized that the first thing that we could do was to provide permits for people to carry on working, which was a big benefit for many of our members, especially the photographers and the journalists. And then the other thing was we did a survey of members to find out who was really suffering because of Corona. And we have 500 members now, and about 60% of the people who replied had lost between 90 and 100% of their income, and just overnight. So we realized that there was a big problem, and we needed to do something about it.
All right. So, what kind of support have you been able to raise for these journalists? And I think you've started some kind of assistance.
Yes. So we were able, because we're an organization that's been going on for so long, we have some funds in reserve. So we were able to take 100,000 Rand of that money without affecting our ability to keep on running. And we've divided that into different categories. So one of the things that we're doing is to approach NGOs and NPOs and offer to do work for them and pay our members to do that work if they were unable to pay. We've also been doing a lot of mentoring and upskilling. A lot of our members who are quite experienced have been offering workshops to members, and that's been very, very popular. We've also started something called the SAFRIA Chronicle, which is a newsletter which comes out once a week that highlights the work that our members do, and we're trying to send that out as much as possible because our members are people in media. They're journalists, designers, translators, editors, photographers, videographers, everything that you can think of around media. So we have skills that people need, especially now when people are trying to communicate like this over Zoom as much as possible and doing webinars, that kind of thing. So we're really trying to reach out to the general public to say, we have these skills, we have these members, don't you want to use our members to do some work? And we had a positive response from one corporate, Teleshare Investments, which runs a number of blogs for insurance companies. And they were actually able to give work to almost 32 members writing blogs but that was also obviously for a short period of time. And then we've also been working with SANEF to find ways to distribute food funding to people. And also the other thing we've been doing for our own members is to work to provide food funding for people who are really in a bad way, and working with a company called 6.50 for that, to distribute the money to the members. But it's all very limited. We need help, and our members are still in a situation where they don't have work, and some of them don't have food.
All right, you know what, let's talk to one of your members because we've got on the line Hebron Maponya, who's a freelance journalist. Let's hear what his story is. Hebron, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, and thank you so much, Tulin, for having me on the show. And just a point of correction, I'm not a journalist.
Oh, okay.
I'm a student freelancer.
Okay. All right. So explain to us how COVID-19 has affected you and how Safria has been able to help you. Hello, Hebron?
Well, COVID-19 has, really come in. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
I hear you. Carry on.
Hello? Peter? Yeah, I'm saying that, COVID-19 has really come as a shock to me as a student freelancer, obviously with limited, financial, resources to be able to kind of, survive during this difficult times. And, how it has affected me. It has affected me so badly to a point where I had actually even had payments delayed with based on some of the work that I have actually done for some clients in the city where I'm based.
All right, so how does an organization like Safria help freelancers like you?
Well, I'm really quite grateful related with Safria in a sense that, interest. So what they have actually done is they have a food relief members to apply, and you will obviously sooner or later receive a food parcel. Either therefore you were also negatively affected by COVID-19, and secondly, there's a 5,000 rand relief fund that has been put aside for the members to apply for, so to speak.
All right, Hebron, I'm going to go back to Lynn now to get a little bit more sense of how freelancers can join the association and get some assistance. Lynn, you were talking about needing help, and I suppose that means funding. Who's been helping you? I think you've mentioned a few organizations, but you certainly need much more, because I would imagine there's a lot of people in need.
Yes, there are. Really, the biggest thing for us, I think the best way to keep people's dignity and independence is for people to provide work for our members. We would love it if people needed websites or blogs or translations or editing, things that most corporates, most even small companies need. That would be our number one. If we can get people to start using our members and giving them work, that would be the first prize. But we do also have a fund available where people can donate directly to there's a link on the 6.50 site, which I think you have, that people can donate directly, or they can email me at chair@safria.co.za, and that money is then distributed to the members based on how much income they've lost. So even with the work, what we're doing is almost like a BEE, where we're saying how much how much have you been disadvantaged? And if we have two people with the same skill level, if one has been more disadvantaged by COVID, then they are more likely to get that work. So we're using a committee to choose people. We're keeping it very transparent and independent.
All right. And how does one apply? Does one have to be a member first? How does it work?
Yes, for our funds, you definitely have to be a member, but you can join at safria.co.za, and our membership fee is 500 Rand, but a year, and we're allowing people to pay it off at 50 Rand a month for 10 months. So there's no interest or anything added onto it, but we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to apply. And then they work, and the area that they're working in is vetted by a committee. So, and then they'll be included in our membership and be part of the Google group, which is like a virtual newsroom where people are able to get advice and able to find out, to network with other journalists and other media people, which is really important.
We're hearing about thousands in terms of job cuts and retrenchments. How many members do you think are affected by what's been happening?
I'd say probably about 60 to 70% of our members have been affected really badly. I think everybody's been affected. I don't know anybody that hasn't seen some effect from Corona. I know for myself, our household has lost 70% of our income. We're still fine. We're okay, but it's really affected everybody. I can't think that there's anybody who hasn't been affected.
All right, Hebron, let me come to you again. I'm just thinking you must have friends as well in a similar boat. What's the conversation like for those that are just not getting work at all?
Well, you know what? COVID-19 has actually limited the access to information based on different type of tools that we actually use to communicate. Because if you therefore don't have the finances to purchase data, for instance, then you only have no way that you can be able to communicate that are going under, that are faced up with the same challenges.
All right. Hebron, we're going to have to say goodbye to you. The challenging connection there. But Lynn, perhaps a final word from you. Has government been able to support perhaps the Department of Communications at all in any way?
No, the big problem is that freelancers aren't getting the same kind of recognition as other people, but also generally freelancers don't have long-term contracts. We're called in at the last minute, or we have sometimes have a retainer, but it's not very often not a contract, which means it makes it very difficult to apply for government funding. So we've been working with some of our sister and brother organizations. We have an organization called LAMP, which is the language and media practitioners, and also working with others like the SAGA, the Actors Guild, to try and find ways that we can speak to the government as a united voice for freelancers in the media and other industries.
All right, Lynn, we're going to have to leave it there, but great work that you're doing. Let's just hope that you get support so that you can support those many, many freelancers across the country that need your help. Thanks so much indeed.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, that was Lynn Smith, who's the chairperson of the Southern African Freelancers Association, saying about 60 to 70% of their members are in desperate need at the moment. They're trying to help them as much as they can, but they need your support. So you can go to the SAFRIA website if you want to assist, and that way you'll be able to reach out to many freelancers across the country that are going through desperate times at the moment. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Media Monitor. Stay with us.
If you haven't called Outsurance to find out if they can save you money on your car insurance, you're in luck. Because if they can't beat what you're currently paying, now you can ask them for 500 Rand. And if you've been with the same insurer and claim-free for the past 3 years, then tell them you want a massive 1,500 Rand. Savings or cash, you always get something out. SMS card 44211 or call 08600 60,000 for a quote.
Royal Tent is ready to serve the nation. We are the largest manufacturers of frame tents, event tents, medical tents, isolation field hospitals, portable toilets, water tanks, VIP toilets, and mobile cold rooms. In this time of national crisis, we at Royal Tent are ready to offer the best disaster management solutions. Buy direct from the manufacturer. Royal Tent, world's best tents.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we're talking, of course, about all of these retrenchments that have been taking place. And I can just tell you that SANEF, the South African Editors Forum, has released this statement, and they said that the South African National Editors Forum is deeply concerned by the ongoing waves of retrenchments at media houses across the country that are also taking place at Pride Media, includes 702, KFM, Cape Talk, as well as national news brand Eyewitness News. The Prime Media Group has 786 full-time employees, including 323 at Prime Media Broadcasting, which is the largest division. And the media company has not announced how many employees will be affected. And SANEF notes that this announcement comes hot on the heels of Media 24's announcement of a possible 510 retrenchments, which follows announcements of possible retrenchments of 600 employees at the SABC. We'll hope to get, during the course of the week, more on that statement from SANEF, speaking to the challenge that we're talking about just before the break. Now, last week, if you watched the program, we spoke to the National Community Radio Forum's spokesperson in the Northern Cape about issues in the community media sector following their participation on Radio Africa Day's conference. Now, in the interview, one of the issues that tackled was funding, and this is what he had to say.
Can be improved by government improving the resources for the MDDA. And I think the USAF levies, Universal Services Access Fund levies, which are contained in the Electronic Communications Act, where the likes of the public broadcasters and commercial broadcasters are supposed to pay money to develop community broadcasters. This money should go to the MDDA, and it must go to one pot. It is not going to one pot currently because these broadcasters can elect to pay the money either to the MDDA or to ICASA. And the money that goes to ICASA then never gets back to community radio. So there's one way of developing a model to say that let's get this money going to one pot. And I think the relationship with local government must be improved to ensure that community radio is able to access those communication budgets.
Well, of course, there's been responses to that, and the ICASA, as well as the Community Radio Forum, saying that that was an entirely accurate reflection of what was said last week. Now, Egyptian journalist arrested after appearing on the Al Jazeera network has died of COVID-19. His daughter confirmed days after he was released from detention. Mohammed Munir, who was 65, had been arrested in mid-June and charged with membership of a terrorist group, dissemination of false news, and improper use of social networks. His arrest, widely criticized by rights groups, came after he appeared on the Qatar-based satellite news channel. Egypt labels the channel a mouthpiece for the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood, a charge that Doha has denied. Now, yesterday, Nelson Mandela International Day was celebrated in honour of South Africa's first democratically elected president. It's celebrated each year on the 18th of July, Mandela's birthday. Ever since that day was officially declared by the United Nations in November 2019. Now, the first UN Mandela Day was held on the 18th of July 2010. Well, today we go back into our archives and we go back to the 18th of July 1997 when Nelson Mandela celebrated his 78th birthday. This is how the SABC covered that story that day.
President Nelson Mandela celebrated his 79th birthday today. For South Africa's first democratic head of state, it was a quiet day with family at his Gauteng home. Linda van Tilburg reports.
The song was played all over South Africa when Nelson Mandela was on the campaign trail in the run-up to the '94 elections. Since then, not only the ANC, but South Africans of different political persuasions have adopted him as a symbol of the new South Africa. Mandela is an international superstar and universally acknowledged as one of the great men of our century, not only because of his sufferings for a political ideal, but also because he led South Africa through what the world still perceive as a miraculous transition. The man also has style. He's rarely seen in a suit. He even defied the stuffiness of British tradition by attending the Queen's banquet in a trademark Mandela shirt. And when people start dancing, he joins in. Even his dancing, the Mandela shuffle, is copied throughout the world. At one stage, many feared that he would not lead South Africa to the next election, but after thorough tests, he was given a clean bill of health. Apart from a knee which continues to bother him, Mr. Mandela is still going strong, and he's still young enough to be in love with Mozambican companion, Mrs. Graça Machel. But the burdens of office are getting heavy after more than 60 years of political activity. He's gradually handing over the reins to his deputy, Thabo Mbeki. Mr. Mandela plans to leave his post by the '99 elections, but for South Africans, he will always be their leader and the symbol of victory over apartheid. Linda van Tilburg, SABC, Pretoria.
Supermodel Naomi Campbell has arrived in Johannesburg. She was welcomed by children from different welfare organizations at Johannesburg International Airport. Campbell will be involved in a full year's advertising campaign for a South African retail store.
Queen of the Catwalk, Naomi Campbell will spend the rest of her stay here doing what she does best. Her promotional activities will range from television work to print advertising. Campbell promoted the Versace collection by Gianni Versace, who was shot and killed outside his Miami mansion 3 days ago. On her arrival, she did not speak to anyone, but displayed her $1 million smile. She was quickly escorted off the airport for the first photo shoot of her advertising campaign. Tonight, she will hand over a cheque of 150,000 Rand on behalf of a retail store to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Campbell will be leaving on Tuesday.
All right, that was supermodel Naomi Campbell, who was always grateful that Madiba had taken her on as his honorary granddaughter, very close to her, and she says that she was very happy to have been welcomed into his family and did quite a lot of work for Madiba during the time that he was alive, particularly with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Media Monitor. Stay with us.
We live in a new high-tech environment. Because of the technology, some of the world's wealthiest people are tech entrepreneurs. Tech is how we play and how we work. For your tech conversation, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
The storm has arrived in Gauteng, the COVID-19 storm.
At the current rate, we are seeing that we are having a fast increase, and it's something that concerns us.
People are moving around like everything is okay because the idea that lockdown levels are low.
Swift behavioral change is needed if the spread is to be contained.
It will be very, very helpful if in the meantime what is preventable and what can be managed is also given as much attention as possible.
As the Provincial Command Council in our province, we are making representation to the National Command Council on reinstating some of the harsher stringent measures.
Firstly, CM agreed that only grades 6 and 11 will return, and provinces that are ready and institutions that are ready will then also phase in the ECD programs.
Why the rush to get back now at this time in the middle of a peak?
And I'm saying their response confirms the correctness of the fact that parents and learners want to go to school.
We're not happy at all because we got a challenge with the PPE.
There was no need for us to rush for the reopening of the schools.
By opening or reopening of the schools, we are actually giving the virus a chance. That's why we are saying to whoever is the decision makers to review the decision.
We need to think very differently about how we are going to embrace what is left of 2020.
Welcome back here, watching Media Monitor. Now we go to East Africa, where former NTV journalist and blogger Yasin Juma was reportedly arrested and detained in Ethiopia by the country's military on Friday, July the 3rd. Juma was allegedly arrested whilst covering massive protests that erupted in Ethiopia's Oromia region following the death of musician Hashalu Hundessa. Hashalu was an activist for the Oromo ethnic group, and the artist was shot dead whilst driving in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital, on the Monday, June 29. Over 80 people were killed subsequently in unrest in Ethiopia. Right, now, a new association of journalists has just been formed, the Foreign Press Association of Africa, which describes itself as a professional body for journalists covering Africa for the foreign media. On their Twitter page, they declare the following: "We, the members of the Foreign Press Association Africa, believe in credible and impartial journalism that deeply reflects the voices, desire and aspirations of all foreign journalists working and covering Africa from the diaspora and the African continent." Well, to tell us a little bit more about the association and what it hopes to do, I'm now joined by the association's chairperson, Kennedy Wandera, who is himself a TV and radio correspondent for the Voice of America Swahili service in Nairobi. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me.
All right, before we talk about the association, I know that one of the things that you'll be concerned about is what's happened to fellow Kenyan journalist Yasin Juma. Tell us a little bit about what the association would like to do when things like this happen, a journalist gets arrested for doing their job.
Yeah, it's a situation that we, just like any other organization, would want to follow up. And Yasin Juma's situation is reflects on the bad side of African governments on how they are looking at journalists. And just like any other association championing for the rights of journalists, we look at it as something that we can follow up with governments, because these are just journalists who are reporting about events in these particular countries. And for Yasin Juma's case, we've been furious about it because the Ethiopian authorities have been withholding information about his whereabouts, and it's just a couple of days that now they've been able to tell the public what is happening about Yasin Juma. But FPA, as it's referred here in Africa, we intend to work with African governments, telling them that there is a need for them to anchor respect for journalists who are operating in Africa, because they just said stories to the public. They can't harbor any ill motive about its its people. And we've always been able to talk to people who are working in these institutions of governments, telling them that it's very important on how we can be able to, governments can be able to engage with the journalists on the continent. So this is it's one of the most unfortunate situations that is unfolding in the continent. But FPA will not relent on calling African governments to act and do what is right in championing for the rights of journalists.
All right, let's talk about the FPA. There are a number of journalists' associations across the continent already. What's going to be different about this one, and what does it mean to be a foreign press association?
Yeah, this is a unique association because it brings all those who are working for the foreign media, be it in diaspora or on the African continent, but they're covering and reporting about Africa. So there has never been an association bringing together all people who are reporting about Africa, especially for the foreign media. And there has always been a narrative advanced outside here that Africa is being reported negatively in the foreign media. So and most of the people who write these stories are we journalists who are coming from the African continent. So we've looked at this and said that there is also a new side, another side of the coin about Africa that we can report. Africa is not just all about conflicts. Africa is not just about issues that negate its people. So if we can be able to come together as journalists who are covering Africa, be it in Africa or outside the continent, then there is a need for us to look at what Africa stands for and the values, the traditions, and what has not been told outside there. Because if we let people just describe Africa the way they are describing Africa, then we might miss the whole picture of who Africa is, who Africa are, its people, its traditions, and we thought it's just important, other than championing for the rights of journalists in Africa, we thought it was important that we bring people together, journalists who are covering Africa, be it in Africa or outside Africa, to understand that Africa has its values and traditions, and we need to champion these rights, we need to champion these traditions, just like the media houses that we work for. We have segments about Africa. So if we can be able to identify this impact, the stories that have impact about Africans, people will be able to have a different eye on Africa. Yeah, you've seen like the issue regarding COVID-19. There has been a lot of sensational reporting about Africa, that we have collapsed health systems in Africa. If the pandemic gets in Africa, it's going to be a disaster. But what has happened so far in Africa is out. Everybody can be able to see what's happening on the continent and outside there. So we have positive sides of the continent, but we're also saying that we are going to own up. Our journalists must own up what's happening in certain countries, because we have governments that are advancing ill motives against our people. So if we can be able to single out these governments, and we intend to work with the institutions outside Africa or within Africa, AU, UN, and the rest, so that at least we can be able to call out these governments that are affront to their people, these governments that are not advancing what they promise their people. So FPA is there to be a voice to the African people and tell an African story the way it is in the African perspective.
All right, so let me just get some clarity here. Let's take you, for example. You work for Voice of America Swahili service. So your employer essentially is in Washington, D.C. They will say to you, we need a story out of Nairobi on something. How do you then engage through the FPA for you to be able to manage your employer who's in America?
That's a good question, Peter. If my editor, and has been the case, there's a story about Nairobi, it's not about telling FPA that I'm going to do this story and how should I go about it. I'm a journalist, a professional journalist, and I understand the angle of a particular story, how that particular story is developing. Yeah, so I'm also bound to just within my professional background to look at the story and report the way it is, not necessarily looking at the, sensationalizing that particular story. So of course I can't tell FPA that you people tell me how should I go about this story. I have the techniques. My editor in Washington DC is going to tell me, Kennedy, you are working on this story, try to look at both angles, because I also need to do a fair story, a balanced story, not story that's going to negate one side and also look at the other side and say perhaps that there's an angle that I'm missing. So FPA just comes in and advising journalists, telling journalists, yes, that we have stories. Yeah, because it's we who are commenting these stories to the foreign media. So if we can be able to tell these particular stories, looking at the reality, because many stories have been told about Africa also out of reality, not in African perspective. Yeah, you see somebody come and tell the story, and when you look at who is speaking the story, absolutely it's non-existent. Yeah, people write stories and tell about a particular issue that has happened in Africa, but if you make a follow-up, you realize that it's all made up thing. So we just need to caution. We are cautioning our journalists about this, that let it be a reality. Let it depict the real situation. Let it not just be a story that you people have come up so that you want to paint Africa, or you want to paint a certain country in a negative way. We have to base our stories on ethical and professional backgrounds and values of journalism, and that's what we intend to do, because we intend to write African stories in African perspective, looking at the reality. Of course, we don't want to hide things about Africa. If this is bad, Peter, we're saying it's bad. If President Kenyatta, for instance, in Kenya, is doing something that negates what he has always stood for, then he has to be told this is wrong. So we are not saying that we should be hiding these ills, but reporting about them authoritatively, but in the African perspective, telling people that this is what is happening, not just sugarcoating and sensationalizing stories.
All right, okay, talking about stories, let's focus in on Kenya. And you've got a couple of papers that grabbed your attention. Take us through the first one. Which paper is it and what story?
We have Sunday Nation. Sunday Nation has a leading story here. There has always been a chaotic scenes experienced with those who are supporting the deputy president. You remember the Kenyan president and his deputy have not been in good relations. So his allies have been moving around the country trying to woo voters, because Deputy President William Ruto has indicated that he's going to be on the ballot when it comes to 2022. So his allies have been tear gas in several places in the western part of Kenya. So the leading story on Daily Nation says chaos as Ruto eyes Raila's base. And down there you realize there's a photo of tear gas, some of his allies being tear gassed. And then there is also a leading story on Daily Nation indicating that there's a man who is popularly known as Papa Shirandula in the country, who has been a huge figure in the entertainment industry. Curtain fall down on him yesterday. He's no more, and the country is really celebrating him because he has been iconic. He has been an icon in the entertainment industry. So Daily Nation refers to him as an icon who has been able to grace Kenyans through their screens, bring entertainment, making people laugh, and he's no more. So Kenyans are mourning and telling through social media a lot about him. Then if we look at the Standard newspaper, that is Sunday Standard, has a grim reality, a grim picture of what Kenya tries to do, where Kenya perhaps will be in the coming days. It says on the top page, says that around 65% of Kenyans might contract COVID-19, and this, if at all, Kenyans are going to be careless with how they maintain the containment measures. So that is a story that is on Sunday Standard, but there is also a story on the Standard page indicating that President Kenyatta is reaching out to former Prime Minister, who is Orange Democratic Party leader, Raila Odinga, there has been a standoff on revenue allocation in the parliament. There has, up to date, there's no formula of sharing revenues between county governments. So there is that story indicating that President Kenyatta has sent a number of his allies to Odinga's camp so that they can be able to talk and agree on how they can be able to vote in parliament so that there could be a formula on how counties can be able to share revenues.
All right, Kennedy, that's where we're going to have to leave it. We wish you the best of luck with the Press Association, and I'm sure that people just need to go onto your website or Facebook page to find details how they can join, and let's hope that you're able to raise the game in terms of telling that African story. Asante sana.
Asante. Thank you so much, Peter, for having me.
All right, that's Kennedy Wandera speaking to us from Nairobi. Okay, now let's continue. An interesting story. Remember, just before the break, we were talking a little bit about what was said last week on one of our programs. And, well, we have got a response now from ICASA, which has responded saying that they were concerned by what was said by the guest that we had last week. The independent community, the ICASA says that they'd like to assist to clarify the National Community Radio Forum to understand the role of the authority that relates to the Universal Service of Access Fund. And they said that it must be put on record that the role of ICASA as contained in the Electronic Communications Act is, amongst others, to issue licenses, monitor compliance, develop regulations, and do all those other public interests. Does not administer, does not sponsor, and does not fund or allocate USAF collections to the community radio stations. All right, so that was from ICASA. That was their response to what was said by one of our guests last week. And they said they'd like to correct the misconception and then the National Community Radio Forum also responded, and they said that we agree with ICASA on the interpretation of the law. We think that ICASA might have misunderstood our message, and we'd like to clarify the following. So they also talk about encouraging all contributing broadcasters to make their entire Universal Services and Access Fund contributions to the MDDA to boost the promotion of media development and diversity agenda. All right, and that's a response to what was said last week on the program when we spoke to the Community Radio Forum's Northern Cape representative, and ICASA not happy with some of the things that were said, and the National Community Radio Forum also responding. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at some papers in South Africa.
I'm an ex-offender. I served a 10-year sentence. Prison, I require 16, 17 hours. Like Mamela radio every day. And Ukozi FM gave me hope during my hopelessness days. I'm a CEO and founder of Ukozi Solutions. Its primary focus is to deal with corruption, bribery, fraud, and theft. Imagine from prison to businesswoman/entrepreneur because of SABC Radio.
The 37 million rand controversial border fence caught the attention of lawmakers after it was vandalized a few days after construction.
Is the quality of the fence best given the value of the money?
I asked who did the due diligence. The answer is the department. I'm not looking for a department. I know it's the department. I'm looking for a person or persons.
We have been proactive to seek the investigations and the assistance of the Auditor General.
Something is not right. Something is amiss. The pieces of the puzzle don't seem to be fitting.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now let's take a look at what our Sunday newspapers are reporting here at home. And joining us to unpack this is William Bird, who's Director at Media Monitoring Africa. Thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program. All right, before we get into the papers, just a quick comment on all these retrenchments and job cuts that we're seeing right across the board. I mean, my heart goes out to the people that are on those lists and freelancers who are just not getting gigs anymore. What have you been seeing and sensing?
Yeah, look, we're in for really rough times. I think one of the figures this week said that there are now more people unemployed than employed in South Africa, and that pretty much speaks to it. So I think to imagine that the media sector would somehow have been immune to that would be just out of touch with reality. So, we know that there was reports in the media this week that Prime Media was also starting their Section 189. So it's a rough, awful time for people, and it's we have to hope that things like SANEF's initiative to help try and get people some form of small relief is at least able to expand, because this is going to be a long, hard period for everyone.
All right, so which papers grabbed your attention this weekend?
So I think that if you look at some of the common themes among them, it's the issues around unemployment, it's issues around the schooling, and of course around the alcohol ban, and then different media putting forward different sides to that kind of debate or that argument. I think one of the other telling stories that today is around the request for government to make the advisories that have been presented by the advisory committee, make those public. And that seems to make a lot of sense, because why would you not want the public to know what those things are unless you're taking decisions fundamentally at odds with those particular things? I think, though, that for me the story of the week broke before the weekend, and that's just about that triple pandemic, really, which is about the numbers of people that are unemployed and the number of people that go to bed hungry every day, and how women are disproportionately impacted by that. I think it's absolutely it speaks to a crisis of where we are as a nation. And we then also have to deal with the actual health crisis that that all of us think about every day.
And of course, I mean, the Sunday Times, City Press, both leading with the same story, and that's the schools. And as a parent, you're worried, but the scientists are saying that children are the least vulnerable. And so there's this. What do? You don't send them to school, and they lose out on their education. The scientists are saying that really the children are not as vulnerable as adults, and yet the teachers are adamant. The SADTUs of this world are saying this can't happen.
I mean, I think that this kind of epitomizes the impossible position just about everyone in a position of authority is in. You're caught consistently on every issue between a rock and a hard place, so it's like, do you open? Yes, you should, because we need children to be at school. They're far safer there. They'll get fed. They're less exposed to potential harm than being left alone to fend for themselves at home. There are a lot of really incredibly solid arguments around that. Against that, of course, is the equally legitimate concerns of our educators, who also don't want to transfer it, and the fact that the World Health Organization talks about when community transmission is low, then you should be sending children back to school. And in South Africa, it's just exploding. So it's like, the people that have to do these things, I think we do need to have a lot more empathy for the fact that whichever way they go, it's going to be, to a large degree, the wrong decision. And possibly, though, where we err, I think, is that sometimes we don't make any kind of decision and we just sort of go, well, we don't know quite what to do. And so for the media, the real challenge there is how do they reflect that complexity and leave their readers and their audiences thinking, okay, I think I understand the issues and the debates, and I can see why this is so hard. Because it's the same with the alcohol debate. You can make the compelling evidence presented in our media today and over the week about why and how potentially helpful it is, and equally compelling evidence presented to say, well, this is how it isn't helpful and how we could have done something different. So I guess that it really means that this is the nature of dealing in a crisis where things change all the time.
All right, William, we're going to have to leave it there. It sounds like your dogs would like some attention outside, so we'll say goodbye and say thank you very much for joining us. Take care. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you.
All right, that's William Bird, Director at Media Monitoring Africa, joining us there, taking us through the Sunday papers. And that's how we come to the end of this week's edition of Media Monitor. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. And please, we're number 5 in the world now in terms of infections. So you have got to protect me and I've got to protect you. Wash your hands, sanitize them, social distancing, stay at home as much as you can. But most importantly, what you've got to do is wear one of these. Have a good week. Bye-bye.